What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Rusto Mod. We are back on the Sasquatch project, our 1959 Ford F250 that in the last previous episodes we actually chassis swapped onto a 1994 7.3 liter turbo diesel chassis. So we wanted to make this truck look really cool on the outside, that old school Ford look, but have a little bit more modern drivetrain underneath and power it with the 7.3 turbo diesel. So in the last episode, we were able to actually mount the cab to the chassis. We ran into some problems with fitting up the cab. We got those problems figured out when we put on our Detroit steel wheels with 37-inch tires. So now we have a few more things to tackle with actually mounting the body to the chassis. So let's dig in. I added a pretty big spacer for the cab lift to lift the body up so we could fit our 37-inch tires, and ended up we really probably didn't need to lift the cab up as much as we did in the previous episode. So what I did was I went through and I basically cut all those body lift spacers in half, and then I dropped it down about 2 inches. So now that we got the actual cab itself mounted to the chassis, I want to be able to mount this front clip to the chassis. So I'm going to make a little core support mount for this, so that way we can mount the front clip on here and this won't go anywhere, and that will be tied in as well. So I want to try to use the original core support mount that mounts right here. And you can see how far away we are from the frame. So what I'm going to do is I want to try to get a tube across the frame to the other side. That way we can basically move the mount from here to right here underneath that existing core support mount. And then we'll just pop a hole through the tube and then bolt our new mount right here in the original core support mount. So I'm going to make up a tube real quick and then I'll show you guys what it looks like. All right, so essentially that is what it's going to look like. You can see the original mount, the mount that we're going to use, and this tube. Now I did have to cut the mount in half, so it's an inch shorter than this one to account for the 1-inch tube that we're going to use. So we got that all plugged in there. So now I'm going to try to get this tube straightened up, and then I'll probably end up marking it for the hole so that way it's easier to drill outside the truck, put it back in, and then weld it into place. Well, I got my tube all marked up here. So it's about 4.5 inches from the edge of the tube to those cab mounts on each side. So that also tells me that the front end is pretty much lined up. I'm gonna throw in a riv nut. Love these things. Drill a hole in and put those in. That way I don't have to have a nut on the bottom of it. So I'm gonna throw some riv nuts in here, grind this rusty tube down, and then see if we can tack it in the frame. We're getting ready to pull this front clip off so that way we can get to a bunch of other stuff under the hood and make it a lot easier to work on. I wanted to tack this into place first. That way I know where it's going to go when we put it all back together. So now let's dig in, and I really want to try to figure out how we're going to do this transmission tunnel. I want to get the transmission tunnel kind of figured out first because I really want to get the steering and the brakes, and we have a lot of room clearance issues underneath the dash there. So let's show you guys what I'm talking about and figure out a way to make this work. So the biggest issue with basically this entire build is how far back the engine is underneath the dash. Now I've been trying to think of ways to try to make this work so it's not super invasive, and I went to the junkyard and I actually picked up one of these transmission tunnel covers. I got this out of like an 80s Chevy van and it was only $10, so I figured I might try it. I fit it in there and it just is too big. It sits way too far back. So after talking with some buddies and thinking about it a bunch, I decided I'm just going to make the entire thing out of sheet metal, but I do want to make it removable so that way if I ever have to remove the transmission or work on the back of the engine, I can be able to remove it to get to some of those things. So I want to make basically like a big panel on the back that can come off but I need to connect the dots from that panel to the firewall. And the only way I can think to do it is just use some cardboard templates and cut some stuff out. Now, the transmission tunnel really isn't that big of a deal, but the big problem that I have is the steering wheel and the brakes. So if you can see the steering, I ended up disconnecting the column there, and it ended up hitting our exhaust manifold there on the back of the motor. So the steering really needs to go way farther up if it's going to stay in the same spot. The other issue I have is this truck was a manual transmission truck, and this is the clutch pedal. So the brake pedal I had to completely remove to be able to fit the engine where it is right now. So we have to figure out the pedals, and that's really the big hiccup with this build, is it's going to be kind of awkward with your feet whenever you're driving the truck. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make the pedals as comfortable as possible with this invasive transmission tunnel and firewall. The first thing that I have to do is I'm going to start by just tracing out the transmission tunnel that I'm going to make in poster board, and then I want to try to tack it into place, at least on this section, so that way I can see how much room I have for my pedals. All right, well, we got our first panel made up there, and this is the one that I really wanted to see in place because you can see how little room we have for a gas pedal. Mind you, this is the clutch pedal, so we are way past the point of actually having a normal gas and brake pedal, but I'm thinking I'm gonna make this the brake pedal and then put a gas pedal in here, but we have to see. So you can see I'm trying to get this as tight as I can against the turbo because it's very close to the edge of the dash. So whenever I make the piece going across there, I really don't want to hit the dash, and you have to get to all the wires and everything up there, so it's going to be kind of tight. I'm going to tack this into place, and then I put a little bend on top so we can go off that to make the next piece. I'm going to eventually pull this cab back off. At that point, I can go ahead and clean it up. I just want to see how much room I have on the inside, so that way I can start doing the brakes and steering. All right, guys, got that piece tacked in on the driver's side so I can kind of gauge my foot room. Now I think I'm going to start with the passenger side and get this piece tacked in, and then I'm going to do the top. All right, now I got the other side tacked into place. So now we have to connect the top, and that's going to be a tricky part because you can see our glove box is right there, and it's going to be kind of hard to weld up underneath the dash there. So what I'm going to do is, this is all packed up and doesn't really look very good. So I'm going to try to bend a piece to kind of go right here in this spot, but I'll make it look a little bit better than what the cut job we did before looks like. And then whenever I pull the cab off, I'll just make some kind of pieces to match the nice bend versus like the cut up pieces up there. It'll look a little bit better whenever I'm done. All right, well, this thing is kind of a little bit of a pain to do with no tools and making this basically with a hammer, but I got it in there and you can kind of see what I'm doing now. So I have this corner flange here, and then I bent it up, and then it goes under the dash a little bit and then comes down. So I have a flange on here, so that way I can put some rib nuts and then probably a gasket on here. And that way I should be able to remove this panel here, and that way I can get to the back of the motor. So it's tacked in there for now. You can kind of see up there that it still has a little bit of a lip. So whenever I pull the cab off, I'm gonna go ahead and just chop that lip off and then re-weld this a lot better than what it is right now. I'm just trying to get placement so I can figure out all the rest of the sheet metal on this. So we will make it look a lot better a little later, but I'm very close. All I have to do is bend the flange on that one and then connect it to there, and then we should have kind of our own little doghouse cover. Then we're gonna have to make our actual transmission tunnel piece. That will come up here and then hopefully connect to that doghouse cover. And then this section and that plate that's gonna go on there are both gonna be removable. All right, guys, well, we got the hard part of the transmission tunnel kind of completed. It's a lot of work, and I don't really have the greatest tools here to really fabricate it that well. And I honestly don't really have the experience to do it either. But that's why I'm doing this, to show you guys how I can do it in my garage. You probably can do it a little bit better than me at home. So now we got that halo piece kind of over top of the firewall where the motor's pushing back. We can start to make our transmission tunnel and connect the dots. So let me show you guys what it looks like and then show you what we're gonna do. So you can kind of see it taking shape now that I have everything tacked together. So we're gonna make a little tunnel that goes over there, and then kind of a 90-degree piece that bolts up to our little flange there. So it's basically gonna come down straight and then come to the floor. I'm gonna throw some rib nuts in there, but first I need to get this bottom section made so that way we can see how much room we have to the new section that is now the firewall. All right, well, it's a little bit easier for me just to have measured the transmission tunnel than for me to actually like make it out of poster board. So that's what I did. I measured basically the entire size that it needs to be, and then added on some flanges for me to be able to bend it so that way it can have a little lip to bolt to. So I drew it all up on some paper and then transplanted that to the metal. So now I'm just going to cut it out and then bend it and see how it looks. All right, after beating that thing into shape, I'm trying to get a corner bent, but then obviously the table is in the way. And then I was trying to move some stuff to get on the edge of it, but anyway, it didn't work. Definitely not the right way to do it. I really wish I had a handbrake to be able to do it by hand, but I just don't have it right now. But this is a good time to say, if you guys are interested in supporting the channel, go to the merch store. There is a link down in the description, and we have a ton of t-shirts, stickers, a bunch of stuff on the new merch store for all your favorite projects here on Rustomod. So if you want to help me get a little bit better equipment, go hit up the merch store and grab some t-shirts of your favorite builds that we have here, and you can help fund all these projects that go on, because I'm just doing it by myself for free for you guys. So it definitely helps a lot when you guys buy some shirts. So anyway, I got the little tunnel in there and I'm gonna have to modify it a little bit. So let me show you guys what we have to do. So there is the kind of base shape of the transmission tunnel, but you can see here, the floor curves up a little bit. So I think I'm going to just have to trim this up around so that way it doesn't hit the transmission tunnel and it can actually sit flush on the floor. The other thing I'm going to have to do is, like I was saying, I want to try to give this thing, this downpipe, a lot of clearance. So I think I'm just going to cut like a little arc around it. And then when we put our plate up against here, it should, in theory, go flush to that, but it does kind of kick backwards some there. So I want to kind of make a little tunnel for that as well. But we'll get there whenever we get this all cut up. So first, I'm going to cut that out, get that slid forward. Then I can measure for this, trim that up, and then we can kind of screw it down into place and figure out how we're going to make our final little piece that go on the back. All right, well, I got the piece in there. I got it trimmed up and it's held down with some sheet metal screws temporarily. So now you can kind of see it taking shape. So the final piece is going to be a piece that kind of covers this entire thing. And then I'm going to weld that to this. So that way I can remove it and then I can get to the back of the motor. So I'm going to make it out of some cardboard, poster board, template, and then trim it, fit it to size, and then see how it looks. All right, guys, well, it is taking shape. I am gonna have to trim this up a little bit. It's just kind of rough cut, just a little bit bigger, so that way I knew it would fit. And then I'm gonna tack it up down here. I think I'm gonna just end up cutting the top of that also, and then make like a little channel to kind of cover that up. But overall, I think it turned out pretty good. Definitely a lot better than the big turtle shell transmission tunnel that I see a lot of guys run, which I understand completely of using that. It's probably a lot less work, but I think this is a little bit less invasive to the cab than the big turtle shell. At least the one that I got was really big. So I think this will work pretty good. So let me trim this up and then I'm gonna get it tacked together and it's gonna be what it's gonna be at this point. We finally got the transmission tunnel slash firewall cover in there and I think it looks all right. So let me show you guys what it looks like. So after a lot of thinking and beating metal into place, this is what it looks like underneath the dash there. I don't think it's too bad. It's definitely really invasive, but I'm trying to make it as minimal as possible. I think once we put some carpet in here and then kind of paint that black, it'll kind of disappear hopefully. So that is a lot of work, but that's what it turned out. Like I said, it's not perfect. I'm still learning the fabrication stuff, and with no brake or anything like that to bend anything, it's, you know, it's not the best, but it's gonna get covered up, so I figured I'd try it. Now, the big reason that I wanted to get this done first is because I really need to figure out how we're gonna put the steering and the brakes in there because we don't have a lot of room for that. So my steering column originally went like right here, and we don't really have a ton of room in between there. You can see this is the hole where the column used to go. And this is now the clutch pedal, like I said before. So I'm thinking I should have a little bit of room to run a gas pedal where it's next to the clutch pedal, which is gonna be our new brake pedal. But I'm gonna try to sneak a steering column in between both of those. So in a future episode, that is what we're going to be working on, because that is the biggest thing to try to get this thing on the road. If I can get brakes and steering all hooked up and the throttle pedal, it's huge, because that's pretty much all the things that we need to be able to get this thing driving once we get all the metal work and stuff done. So that'll be nice to knock that stuff out. So I'm pretty sure we're going to tackle that on the next episode. It's been a lot of work on this one, but I appreciate you guys sticking in there and checking out these videos. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe so you can stay up to date with all the rest of this project and the rest of the other projects we have here on Rustomod. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you guys in the next one.